Joining me on Tuesday MMA Talk, talking about UFC 198, we have Connor Reubusch of the Heavy Hands podcast. Connor, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So a lot happened this weekend. A lot of Brazilians got the win, but their one big guy, Fabricio Werdum, knocked out by Ohio's own Stipe Miocic. Now, you're from Ohio, right?
I am.
Well, this is awkward because I'm from Toronto, and you know what's happening tonight, right?
I don't think I actually do. What's happening
The
tonight?
Cleveland Cavaliers, Ohio's basketball team, is against the Toronto Raptors.
Well, if I knew anything about sports that didn't legally involve face punching, of course, recently baseball decided that it wanted to have some face punching too. But yeah, good luck with that. I'll just root for my MMA fighters, and I'll stick with that.
Cool. So then you're allowed on the show today because you don't care about the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Neutral party as far as the Cavaliers go.
Yeah, but talking about Cleveland, Stipe Miocic knocked out Fabricio Werdum. What did you think about that fight?
It's honestly my first feeling is that it could have been so much better.
Yeah,
It was a really stunning ending, but the finish happened on the back of a really strange tactical error. And to Miocic's credit, he seemed to be doing a decent job of dealing with Werdum at range. Werdum wasn't running away with that first round, and Miocic was probably turning the momentum as the round neared its end. But people have pointed to the fact that Miocic landed his jab, landed a right hand, got in that sneaky left uppercut, that's the reason Werdum was forced to make that reckless charge. And I don't really buy that. I can't give all the credit to Verdum's strange tactical decision to Miocic, because this is a guy who's been knocked down by Mark Hunt and Cain Velasquez and Travis Brown. This is a guy who has eaten tons of hard shots from Roy Nelson, went toe-to-toe with Velasquez before beating him. This is a guy who is used to things not necessarily going his way off the bat and who still typically succeeds in being a fairly smart, tactical, collected fighter. So whether it was the 45,000 Brazilian fans in attendance or a bunch of pressure he put on himself, or whether he was overconfident in his ability to turn the tide and absorb punishment because of the Velasquez fight, I don't know. But it was very strange the way Werdum decided to just run after Miocic, both hands flailing, completely out of his stance, chin first, right into a very short punch that normally I don't think wouldn't have even hurt him had he not been running full force into it. It was just a really weird way for the fight to end.
Yeah, it almost reminded me of Jose Aldo against Conor McGregor.
Yeah,
the way that Jose Aldo kind of just stepped in and then got hit right off the bat, and because there was just so much excitement in the air, Aldo was a little nervous. That all kind of collided, and just one big tactical mistake that we're not used to seeing from Werdum, and same from Aldo. We're not used to seeing him do that type of thing.
Yeah, and it was, Aldo's was at least like a setup punch. Aldo's made a little bit of sense. He went to the chest with the right hand and came up with the left hook, and he landed it even as he was unconscious. He managed to slice McGregor's eye open, so that was to his credit, I guess. He figured that McGregor would worry about the right hand, and really he just looked to counter the first thing he saw. For Werdum, it was not even a technical attack. It was just right, left, throwing at the head, no changing of targets. And, Werdum has good cage craft too, but he was just following Miocic along the side of the cage. Somebody said this, I wish I could remember who, but they said somehow Fabricio Werdum managed to give Stipe Miocic the opportunity to land the one punch he lands in every single fight. Yeah. Because that hop step right hand counter is everything Miocic does. Like, everything he does is that single shot, and Werdum gave it to him. It was very weird.
Yeah, so people that would argue that this fight showed that Miocic had the better stand-up than Werdum, because Werdum's stand-up going into the fight, people were just... There was so much credit to it that he was so highly touted, had worked on it so much. And now it kind of looks like, oh, well, you have a guy who is a really good stand-up technical boxer that just kind of floored him and made him look really bad.
Yeah, Miocic is a very good striker too, and I think he is getting better. It's hard to keep in mind that he's only been doing this for, I think, 6 years now. He's 33. the same age as Cain Velasquez, I believe. But in terms of wear and tear and cage experience, he's significantly younger than most other fighters in the elite of this division. And so as his defense continues to improve and his footwork gets a little tighter and he becomes more disciplined and less prone to kind of freaking out and going for every big shot he sees like he did at times in the Dos Santos fight, then I think that makes him a really solid fighter. I certainly didn't expect him to run over Fabricio Verdum, and until that punch, I don't think he was, but he was definitely having his moments. And of the two, he was doing a little more adjusting than Verdum. He was checking the kicks. He was keeping the jab out there. He was doing an okay job. He stayed cool and collected, more so than Verdum did. So he definitely deserves credit for this win. It was just it was just a weirdly unsatisfactory way to see the title change hands for me.
Yeah, it was definitely weird because I was watching the video with my brother and like we didn't really see it coming. It was just like, oh, it was one of those like shock. It was kind of like the Conor McGregor Aldo, going back to that. We're just like, oh, it's done. I wish I'd seen more. I'd rather him hit Verdum get rocked, and then Miocic go after him, pound him out. Instead, it was just like, oh, we're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
Cool.
It was when Aldo happened. I remember because I was really gunning for Aldo in that fight. When Aldo McGregor happened, I remember screaming, "Oh no!" Like Macaulay Culkin from Home Alone, both hands to my face. When the Miocic one happened, I could only laugh because it was such a silly way to get knocked out. Like just running recklessly after someone. It was so bizarre and so out of character for Verdum. And Verdum, he's been reckless in the past. You know, he will brawl when he needs to brawl, but never like that. I've never seen him just because he even got stung before the knockout happened. He came in after Verdum, after Miocic with the punching combinations and got hit with the right hand. And then it's like he got angry or frustrated or something and then just renewed his assault and got hit a second time and it put him out. So I had to chuckle when it was happening live because it was just unbelievable. It's not the way you expect to see any UFC title change hands. It really.
On top of that, the Brazilian fans, no matter what, if it's a good fight or it's a bad fight, if a Brazilian isn't winning the fight, you will hear nothing out of the crowd. The second knockout punch landed, just nothing.
It's my favorite kind of crowd reaction in the entire sport of MMA. And it's not that I dislike Brazilians or that I like to see them lose or anything, but it's so completely at odds with what the reaction should be for a stunning KO.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like when Shogun Rua was knocked out by Ovince St. Preux. Even if you're there to support Shogun, you're gonna cry out. You're gonna be surprised. Yeah, there's gonna be a collective surprise in every other arena in the world. But in Brazil, it's just barely a dull murmur. It's just it's as close to utter silence as you can get in a packed arena. It always makes me giggle.
Now, for somebody that studies striking, your mouth must be watering at the thought of Stipe Miocic against Alistair Overeem. That seems like that would be a nice, technical, heavyweight championship fight. If you were to give an early prediction for that fight, what do you think we would see from either guy?
Yeah, it's a tough one to call. Who has Stipe Miocic faced that? Because a lot of times when I try to look for predictions, I will go the soft MMA math route and try to evaluate what they've shown in similar matchups.
Yeah, he did fight Junior Dos Santos.
Sure.
Yeah, a very different fight though. And Alistair Overeem has showed now that he's not going to do what Fabricio Verdum did in running forward. Alistair Overeem, his style lately has kind of been just lay back, wait for the guy to come forward, and then catch them.
Right. I would have given Miocic a pretty easy pick, actually, if Overeem was still, Ubereem, if he was still trying to do the first round mauling thing that became his style for so many years. But he has really become patient and poised. And really, I think his changes have, because Overeem's always been a little bit of a bully, where he tends to kind of fold. I think he puts a lot of pressure on himself to be in control at all times. And when it's not, then, I don't want to say he quits, but somewhere in his mind, he starts to feel that things aren't going in his favor. He doesn't always seem to feel like he can bring the fight back from the brink. So his career doesn't have a lot of comebacks. Instead, it has a lot of good performances that suddenly nosedive. And recently, I think this style where he's now this kind of tricky outfighter who picks his spots, it helps with that because he no longer has this immense pressure to put the guy away and then get exhausted in the process. He can feel like he's in control of the fight, even if he's not knocking the other guy's head off. So I don't really know how Miocic deals with a good outfighter like that. Normally, he's the one who has his opponent coming after him, and he can throw those backstepping counters and try to use his lateral movement. He moves pretty well for a heavyweight, but so does Alistair Overeem. I kind of like Overeem. I'm going to be honest. I kind of like Overeem because of the variety. Of course, with Overeem, he's definitely more fragile than Miocic. So any one mistake is more likely to end his night than it is Stipe's. But I kind of think with his variety and his weird movement, he doesn't stick to the kind of traditional boxing things that Miocic likes to do. I think that might throw Miocic for a loop. But I'll have to watch a lot of footage before I come down with any concrete prediction.
Yeah, and that fight probably wouldn't be until UFC. Maybe that's the UFC 200 fight that they keep teasing. Maybe they'll put that on, or maybe 201, 202, but we do have a while, so I guess people will look out for your prediction on that on the podcast. One more fight to analyze, not a lot of striking in it, and then I'll let you go. We had Vitor Belfort against Jacare Souza, where Vitor Belfort didn't really do anything. We're so used to Vitor coming out just ambushing people, bang, 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 and if it doesn't work, he loses, and if it works, then he gets a knockout of the night. What do you think happened there? Why didn't he pull that trigger?
I don't know. Vitor is a weird guy. I think he has this thing where he banks really hard on a single technique that's going to be his saving grace, and that, like Overeem, who would bank on that rush, when it isn't, everything falls apart for him. And for John Jones, he seemed really committed to that armbar. He kept going for it as the fight went on, but once it didn't get the tap the first time, you could just see in his body language and everything, it was downhill. Against Jacare, he seemed to have come in really expecting flying knees to be the thing because he kept jumping when Jacare was coming towards him, hoping, I guess, to counter a takedown. So maybe I think with Vitor, he tends to get into this mode where he has one thing in his mind. He has this technique in his mind, and rather than letting it come organically, he seems to wait for it. Pointedly, he looks for the opportunity to use it, and so he lets a bunch of other opportunities go by. And I think that's what happened against Jacare. Jacare did a good job of putting pressure on him. But the thing with Jacare is you can beat him with volume. He doesn't throw a lot. He does a lot of stalking, like a minute of stalking for every 2 or 3 punches he throws. Yeah. But the problem is he is a fantastic wrestler. But you know what I mean? The weird thing is that Vitor ended up pulling guard in that fight. That's the most bizarre thing.
Part. Was that like when I saw that, I was just like, are you giving up? I know Vitor won't give up, and I give him all the respect in the world, but that's not what you do against Jacare Souza, especially since in the last time you lost, it was a guy getting on top of you and pounding you out. It was exactly the same as the Chris Weidman fight.
Yeah, so he now has a guy on top of him who is probably noticeably better than Chris Weidman in terms of top control. Like the guy with the best jiu-jitsu credentials in the entire division. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's just Vitor's weird mentality is that he when his original strategy doesn't work out for him, he just can't keep it together. And so, I mean, I can come up with no other explanation for why it would seem to him at the time a good idea to pull guard on Ronaldo Souza. I have no idea, but Jacare looked good. I expected him to win this fight. You know, I went into this thinking he felt like one of the heavier favorites on the card. Yeah, so he's one fight off of the Yoel Romero loss. But Romero, it was a very close fight. A lot of people thought Jacare won, and Romero is now on the sidelines because of his drug test failure. So I think Jacare has more than earned a shot at the title, and I would be happy to see him rematch either Rockhold or Weidman.
Yeah, and those would be great fights. I would have to predict that Rockhold is probably going to get the win over Weidman just because we don't see a lot of instant rematches where the guy who lost the first fight wins. So in your opinion, if we were to see Rockhold against Jacare, again, nothing against Weidman, not saying he's going to lose, but if I were to predict what the most likely outcome is, Jacare against Rockhold, did you see anything in that Rockhold? And I mean, in the Jacare Vitor Belfort fight that you saw that Jacare would use against Rockhold, or was it just like as expected?
I think Jacare is in the unfortunate position where basically everything he does well is something that Luke Rockhold is really good at stopping. Rockhold's style is the anti-AKA style because he's the only guy at AKA with his frame. He's this tall, long guy among guys like Cain Velasquez and Daniel Cormier, and even guys like Josh Thompson and Koscheck. Yeah, right. Yeah. So most of these guys are like stocky or average height at best, and Rockhold is this weird, lanky guy. And so I think working with guys like Velasquez and Cormier, who would be his main training partners, he's developed this sort of counter stocky wrestler style where he's now very, very good at, when he had to try and go for takedowns against Vitor Belfort, he didn't look so great. He was okay. But when he can stop your takedowns like he did to Weidman and Tim Boach, when he can counter your takedowns and work for your back or catch you in a submission while you're trying to get him on the ground, he's very, very dangerous. And he's longer and cleaner technically than he was the first time he fought Jacare. It's really hard for me to see Jacare either throwing enough volume or being an effective enough wrestler to get this fight to a place where he can consistently score points. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining me on the show today. Is there anything that you want to pimp out, your podcast, your next episode, guests that you have coming up in the future?
Check out Heavy Hands with me and Patrick Wyman. We just had an interview with Dominic Cruz. So if you're looking, we're going to be talking about stuff. We're recording this week's episode tonight, but Dominic Cruz was a fantastic interview. You should check him out. Also, if you're interested in hearing more about the Chris Weidman Luke Rockhold rematch, we interviewed Mark Henry, the coach of Frankie Edgar, Edson Barboza, Marlon Moraes, among others, and he is training Chris Weidman for the Luke Rockhold rematch. So there's a little bit of insight there as well.
Awesome. Connor, thanks.
Thank you.